Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this snowy afternoon. I think most of the state has a little bit of snow on the ground. I think it varies by location, but I think we all are common in that we have snow on the ground and it is cold. But we appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully, we have a good program for you and you can learn a few things. Let me advance here. Just want to remind you that we do have several horticultural specialists that are located around the state. You can kind of find your location in the state and find your person to contact. However, remember, we all have different specialties, so you can reach out to any of us really if you have any questions. And we share and collaborate as a team. So feel free to let us know if you have any questions. It doesn't really matter who you contact, but it might be good for you to kind of know where you are. I'm coming to you from up here in Northwest Missouri. I don't know that we're the coldest place in the state today, but we are fairly chilly up here. And anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. Just as a reminder, there are many different ways that you can view our garden hour. We have live stream through the Zoom. If you're here with us now, you can also go to youtube.com and watch us on live online. And then we also have recordings of past episodes that you can download or view from the YouTube channel. So there are many, many different ways that you can view this information if you need to. So with that, let me stop share. And one other thing before I get going with, or before we start everything, we are going to try a different format today. And we want to open this up to everyone and kind of have more of a conversation about experiences that you may have had with some of the topics that we're talking about today so that we can all share. I think including all the brain power of all the gardeners is always a good thing. So please include your comments in the chat. You can always go to the chat and ask a question directly in there, or if you want to go to ask questions here, we have Kathi Mecham who is running that channel, and then she can pose your question. Or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question to all of us, that is perfectly fine too. We just ask that you don't do that during the presentation, and then we'll kind of prompt you for that. But if you're using the chat, you can add those at any time. So with that in mind, let me stop share, and we are going to hear about this wonderful weather we're having. Zach, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Gwen. And as I'm pulling up my slides here, I believe the last time we met last month, we were talking about the winter weather, and a month later, not a lot has changed because a snowy winter has really continued. Basically, since the start of 2025 in January, we've seen these below average temperatures and lots of chances for snowfall. And that includes our most recent snowfall that a lot of us are looking at today. And this map here on the right shows our snowfall totals over the last 48 hours. Just about all of Missouri at least got some flurries up in northern Missouri, but the bulk of the accumulating snowfall was really south of I-70 and all the way really down to the Arkansas border here. And so anywhere you see these yellows are pockets where we had greater than 6 inches of snowfall accumulation. And so a pretty good snowstorm here for southern Missouri and across the Ozarks as well. Snowfall totals are still kind of coming in today, so these probably aren't final, but just looking at some of the highest totals here, a 9-inch recording here in Dallas County, and then just shy of 9 inches in Cape Girardeau. So a big snowfall for Cape there as well. Now looking here, this is our snow depth, or total snow that's just still sitting on the ground. And Gwen, you were correct. I wanted to show this map here because as of this morning, this shows all of Missouri with at least a little bit of snow on the ground. And so actually, maybe our lightest snow covers in northeast Missouri, who stayed dry over the past few days. But pretty remarkable to see all the way from the boot heel to northwest Missouri, a frozen over and snow covered state here. Over the past week, though, it really wasn't just snowfall. This has been an active pattern that when it hasn't been snowing, we've also had some really high rainfall totals over the past month, especially if you're in southeast Missouri or the Boot Heel. And just this weekend, a very significant rainfall event that made a lot of news for some of the flooding it caused in Kentucky and Tennessee. But if we look down here from Valentine's Day on February 14th through the 16th are 2 day rainfall totals. There were a lot of places with 4 or 5 inches of rain down in the Boot Heel. So while most of us just saw some of the cloud cover and damp conditions, some real issues with heavy precipitation and even some flooding there. So we see over the weekend our highest total was actually at MU's Fisher Delta Research Center, 5.96 inches in the rain gauge there. So very impressive event there. And so here we are with just about a week left in February. I did want to see how the year's shaping up so far and how the current winter will go down into the record books here. But did just want to note that January was colder than average. And so we see our statewide average temperature about 2.5 degrees below average. So if it felt like it was a little colder during January, that's correct there. And then our precipitation was really close to average, almost right on the nose for about 2 inches, which is normal for January. But ultimately, it felt like we had a more active pattern, but a lot of that precipitation was snowfall. So we didn't get the big rainfall totals that would make for a wet month. So pretty close to average on the precipitation there. Now, through the end of January, because we had a warm December, we were just about average for temperatures, about 1.1 degree above average. But we are running colder in February. So I think once we end the month here, our December, January, February winter temperatures will be colder than average. And so this is our first colder than average winter that we've had since 2020, 2021. So if it feels like the winter is a little bit more extreme than we've seen the past few years, that is certainly what we're seeing here in the data as well. And then here is where we're at so far for the month in February. So on the right, this is just our precipitation map for the month. And I'll note that this is liquid equivalent precipitation. So it includes both rainfall totals and snowfall, but instead of putting the snowfall, this is the amount of rainfall that would occur if we melted down all that snow. And really, we see, up to 8 inches so far in southeast Missouri for the month of February, but the rest of the state generally less than 2 inches of precipitation. And so it has been slightly drier than average so far in February, likely because we've had some of these cold temperatures. And so you can see here at most of the sites here across the state, except for Cape Girardeau, slightly colder and slightly drier is what we've seen so far in February. But I will note that we're certainly ahead on snowfall for the month and snowfall for winter as well. So cold and snowy looks to describe this year's winter. And as we finish out February, we really have a few kind of harsh snaps of cold to get through over the next few days. But then maybe we could have a bit of a warm up towards spring coming. And so, unfortunately, here are the low temperatures tonight. We're really going to have the next 2 nights dangerously cold overnight low temperatures, but tonight's will be the coldest we see here. And so, on the left are the forecast lows. So yeah, all the way up into Maryville, -15. So Gwen, it does look like your area is the coldest by far in the state. But a lot of single digits in the negatives across the state, and even places like Poplar Bluff getting down to 2 degrees overnight. The other bad news is that if you go outside, there's also a pretty stiff north wind today, and those wind gusts combined with the cold temperatures are making the wind chill feel a lot colder than the actual temperature. And so, putting together the temps and the winds, we could see wind chill values from -10 to -30 statewide tonight, with the coldest values in Northwest Missouri. So definitely stay warm, stay out of the elements for these next 2 nights, because this kind of cold can be dangerous. But the good news, as I mentioned, is that we will start slowly warming up beginning tomorrow. And so if we look at our high temperatures tomorrow, still pretty cold, but a few degrees warmer than today. But if we look at Friday, most of the state will be in the 20s, maybe even low 30s, and we'll actually continue that warm up over the weekend. So just a couple more days of this really intense cold, and then things look better afterwards. And so warming up, but also expecting a bit of a dry pattern ahead too. It's been really active with lots of storms moving across the country. But here we see this is the 7-day precipitation forecast looking ahead, and barely any rainfall in the forecast for Missouri over the next week. So really expecting a dry week as we see those temperatures continuing to rebound. Now we can also look ahead here. And so this is looking ahead at the days 8 to 14, or the week 2 forecast. And so this actually gets us into that first week of March. And what's good to see here, if you're tired of the snow and cold, the forecast is for some warmer than average temperatures to start building over really the western U.S., but spreading east and warming a lot of the country up. So could see a warm up continue into the first week of March. And then right now, low confidence, but leaning towards maybe a wetter week during that first week of March. But I also want to note, as we're looking at temperatures forecasted to be a bit warmer, climatologically, we're also warming up very fast this time of year. And so here I've just put Columbia's daily average high and low temperature for today. But then 2 weeks from now on March 5th, and you can see those are warmer by the time we get 2 weeks from now. And really, on average, anywhere in Missouri is warming up about a degree every 2 or 3 days. So we are getting into the time of year when we expect to finally start warming towards those springtime temperatures, and also increasing our daylight and day length as well. So that should be a welcome sight as we get into March after a pretty cold winter that we've seen. And then I kind of want to end with a long-term forecast, and this is from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center here. And we see this is their spring seasonal temperature outlook for February through April, and not much in the way of a forecast for Missouri. So this equal chances means they're seeing in the forecast an equal chance for a cold spring or an equal chance for a warm spring. And so not a lot of confidence in that forecast. We might expect some variable temperatures, but the precipitation forecast is interesting. It looks a lot like our current pattern, where we've seen southeast Missouri be a lot wetter than the rest of the state. And right now, the forecast is for this to kind of continue here. And so we will have to watch and see how precip plays out. And finally, the reason the precip in spring might be important here is that even with all this snow and cold temperatures, as I mentioned, precip has been closer to average or even dry in some points over the winter. And so if we look at the U.S. Drought Monitor, still some spots in Missouri that are either abnormally dry or even still in drought from last fall. So we could use a little bit more rainfall to get rid of this dryness before we get into the spring here. But otherwise, hopefully everybody stays warm today, but can look ahead to some warmer temperatures. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I looked out the window earlier and I could see on my maple tree, the little buds are starting to swell. So spring is coming. We just have to be patient with it, with everything. So thank you for that. Next on our docket is Dr. Bob Pierce. He is the Associate Extension Professor and State Wildlife and Fisheries Specialist. We had a question come in about deer and how we can protect our gardens from deer. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. So I will turn it over to Dr. Pierce.
Dr. Pierce, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Dr. Pierce, it's showing that you're muted on my end. Mm.
I believe he's unmuted now.
Okay. Yeah,
We can hear you now.
I was trying to share my screen, but I'm having difficulty doing so. I apologize.
Go to view and then reading view.
Yeah, you have, if you go over one on your screen to reading view, we can see it up there on the top.
Reading view?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
right next to where you're over on the upper left. You'll see normal, outline view, slide sorter, note page, and then reading view. And it looks like you're on slide master right now.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, here we go. I'm on the reading view. I need to be on reading view.
There you go, right there. Bim.
There we go. My
That's it.
apologies.
No worries. Thank you.
And that for some reason I have the screen on. Let's see. Ah. Well, this is a typical winter day for me. How is that looking?
Yeah, click that. What you just, there we go. Perfect.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we saw the,
Well,
we're on slide 4 though. I don't know if that's where you want to start.
that's fine. One of the things I wanted to do was visit for a few minutes about uh, white-tailed deer management, and of course, as you all work with folks, we have resources to help you control a lot of these pesky critters. We have guide sheets and other extension publications that can help address issues. And of course, today I was going to visit a few minutes about white-tailed deer. Jennifer asked me just yesterday if I'd do this, so kind of spur of the moment. But it's very important as we manage wildlife that we recognize some of these principles for controlling animals and preventing damage around our gardens and homes. And it's really important to understand the damage patterns and species that might be responsible, understand their life history and wildlife biology in relation to management, and know some of the alternatives that you can use. Of course, keeping state and local laws in mind as well. But white-tailed deer are certainly a valuable species in Missouri, and we have information on their ecology and management that can be accessed with this publication. And as you work with folks, it's important that you realize that deer have various seasons in which they eat different foods. And during different times of the year, they are attracted to available food sources. Of course, this time of year, a lot of those foods are limited, but deer, through their life history, their populations are very dynamic, dependent upon a number of factors. Does have 2 fawns often, sometimes triplets, so populations can certainly be increased. We have deer that utilize a lot of different foods, as I mentioned, during different seasons. This is a photo at the Bradford farm, just east of Columbia, this time of year. So deer are out looking at a lot of the annual winter forbs that are coming up and just taking advantage of whatever's available. The mast a question was asked, are the acorns that deer really need for high energy during the winter months. Oak mast, both hard mast like walnuts and hickories and oaks, as well as the soft mast, the berries and the soft fruits. that are very succulent. So deer damage is typical. You all have seen a lot of this type of sign where deer are browsing on the buds of trees and shrubs. They may chew succulent vegetation, and a typical sign is the chewing of deer. They don't have incisors, upper incisors, so they typically have a chewing type of damage to the tips of branches. In this vineyard, you can kind of see the tip has been chewed, and the browsing there. And of course, rabbit damage is more typical of a 45-degree angle, where rabbits have the upper incisors where they'll just nip it off at a very distinct angle. Of course, deer also damage shrubs and new plantings with their rubbing habits, the buck rub, typical of late summer, fall, where they're rubbing off on their antlers. And then, of course, we've all seen issues where we have deer trampling ornamental plants around our homes and gardens and doing some damage. And again, in a lot of our garden crops. But anyway, that all is said to just point out that deer have a lot of food habits that they use. They have a lot of foods during different seasons, and they're very opportunistic. They'll just feed on whatever might be available and easily obtained. Typical damage to crops include the springtime grazing of sprouting plants. They'll pull them or nip them off. During the summer, they'll remove corn tassels and bite the tips of corn and browse on our various soybean crops. They'll eat fruits. They bite the tips off corn and other stalks during the fall. But again, with any wildlife damage management program, its success is dependent upon integrated approaches. No one technique will work all the time. And I think as you work with folks and they have deer damage, it's important to point out that, there's going to be a cost to the control. It might be much more advantageous to tolerate some damage and just realize that you're going to have to put up with it, particularly if you're in areas with high deer densities. Again, there's a cost to developing a control program, and some of the benefits may not outweigh those costs. However, if you're raising high-value commercial products, that there's certainly an economic aspect of that, and you have to build in control measures into your business plan and just add that to the cost of doing business in many cases. The most effective deer control by far is legal harvest through hunting. And if you're in an area where you can legally harvest deer through the hunting seasons, by all means, take advantage of those opportunities. Invite hunters to your property. Work with your Missouri Department of Conservation agent to help you in that regard. And again, just take advantage of the legal harvest. If that's not practical, or if you're in an urban area, there's certain techniques that you can certainly implement to prevent damage. You may not solve it all, but you can prevent some from occurring. And by far the most useful techniques are through the use of various fencing designs. These are both permanent fences, like the 8 to 10 inch wire mesh that you might see around high enclosures. These are pretty cost prohibitive, except in areas of very intense agriculture, vineyards, high dollar crops, where you have to make sure that those crops are protected, such as in this case, those high 8 to 10 foot fences. Pretty expensive, but they pay off with the high value crops under certain circumstances. The electric fences are by far more affordable. They offer a temporary barrier, more of a psychological barrier. Of course, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into maintaining an electric fence. You've got to have a power supply, and you can design an electric fence to be more permanent or more temporary, again, depending on the circumstance. A very affordable type of electric fence, we called it the Minnesota peanut butter fence. It was designed up at the University of Minnesota many, many years ago. very portable, and they can certainly help educate deer when they learn to avoid the fence, because the fence has peanut butter baited onto it. And as a psychological barrier, the deer kind of remember that that's going to shock them. And this is kind of the design of that fence. You have a single strand of electric wire with some adhesive tape and aluminum foil, peanut butter baited onto that, about 3 feet or 2.5 feet off the ground. And you could put that fence around a part of your garden or in an area where you see deer that are coming in. And it's pretty effective in just deterring them for a short period of time, and pretty cost effective. Other fence designs include the 2-strand polytape fence. These products are available through your feed and seed stores, MFA, other locations have these polytape type products that can be used. Here you see a design where you have a woven wire fence with 2 upper strands of that polytape to prevent deer from jumping over. And here you have another design, which is a 3D fence, where you have an outer single strand of wire, 3 feet high, and then the back double strand, which kind of gives a visual deterrent. When deer see that, they may be a little less inclined to move through it. Of course, that outer fence is again baited with peanut butter. Those little green blocks can be baited with peanut butter with that aluminum foil. If they touch it with their nose, they'll get a good shock. It's harmless, but they get that shock. And here's that example around a garden where you see that type of design. I'll just mention that all these designs are in our deer management, deer damage control guide, MP 685. That's part of our web page with the nuisance wildlife program. You can access that deer damage guide. Again, the high tensile fences are more expensive. This could be either a 5-wire or 7-wire design. Very, very effective in deterring deer. This is solar powered in this case. And there's also a design that, again, that 3D type of slant will effectively deter deer. When they see that, they don't really know what to do about this kind of contraption when they're trying to walk through an area. But anyway, all these designs are useful. It just depends on the cost and some of the effectiveness of your ability to maintain an electric fence, because they all require power and all kinds of different designs to provide that power through solar or through some of these other types of power systems. Very generally, the costs are minimal. I've talked about $2 or $3 for certain types of fences, up to maybe less than a quarter per foot for the single strand. But again, I think the bottom line is to build a fence before damage starts. It's always easier to prevent a problem from occurring before the feeding pattern begins. Once deer become habituated, they're going to come back through that area. You all know that you've seen deer trails through the woods, or you see where deer will just habitually go through an area on a certain trail. And that's true around your home or anywhere else. They have patterns of movement. And if you can build that fence before damage starts, you're going to be way ahead of the game. Control vegetation around the outside of that fence to help that fence be effective. And again, one other type of insurance is to maybe use some other types of low impedance chargers. Make sure the volts are a minimum of 3,000 volts. And maybe if deer are just coming into one area, you don't need to fence the whole area, maybe just one side. If you have a wood line or other types of areas, you might design a fence so it just protects that area of the field that's adjacent to a wood line or other protective cover that deer will utilize. I know there's a lot of interest in repellents. A lot of folks, you can go to any Lowe's or any type of Home Depot and see just numerous repellent products. Again, keep in mind that repellents will not eliminate damage. They'll only reduce the damage that might be occurring. And even then, they can be very problematic. If it rains, you have to reapply often. Research has shown really mixed results from the use of repellents. If they work well, then they work well. If they don't, they don't. It's kind of a mixed bag. Depends on circumstances. And again, the rainfall patterns can really reduce their effectiveness. And repellents are either taste or odor based. Many of our commercial repellents, you've probably seen these advertised. Each have different uses, different ways of application. I'm not going to go into all that here with time constraints, but just to let you know that they're on the market. Buyer beware, look at the label, make sure that you're applying them correctly. And remember, they can be pretty expensive. So again, they're not going to eliminate the damage. They'll only kind of reduce whatever damage might be occurring. And if you have a lot of deer in an area, these repellents probably aren't going to be that effective as deer densities really, if they're hungry, they're going to come through that repellent and browse on the crops, probably no matter what type of repellent you might use. But again, they're out there. I just wanted to mention those, and this is kind of a list that kind of provides an overview of those various products. And again, can't go into a lot of detail here today, but you all have probably heard of other types of repellents, the non-commercial types, human hair bags, soap bars. I've even had producers that have developed batches of rotten eggs blended up with water and pumped around an area with a garden sprayer. So that's getting pretty hardcore to do that, but they've shown that odor can maybe work for a short period of time. And anyway, different things that folks have tried that have had some success, but again, very problematic as well, because they may work, they may not work. There's so many things that can affect the deer patterns, the number of animals in an area, what the different foods that are available. If deer are moving over large areas, they may have a pattern of movement that you're just right in their way, and they're going to be around your place and enjoy what you're planting. Many techniques have been tried, but again, if there's a lot of food spread out over an area, then the damage at one site may be minimal. If you're the only one with a certain type of crop that they're attracted to, then you might have a little more damage to be expected. But anyway, that's just a quick overview. A lot of factors go into how deer behave. Again, summary that repellents will not eliminate browsing, they'll only reduce it. They'll alter their behavior, but again, deer will have to have alternative food sources in the area, or they'll still use that area very, very heavily. Department of Conservation provides a lot of good technical assistance. They have wildlife damage biologists that can come out and help you. Also, we have a new program in Missouri, a deer management program that the Department of Conservation conducts. If you have issues, there's potential for them to issue permits for you to take deer out of season. So just be aware that those programs exist. And then, of course, we have our extension resources, the damage control guide, and then our program, nuisance wildlife program, has all the different guides, different species that you might have problems with available, and I hope it'd be helpful. And with that, just a quick overview. I know I took a little more time, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Dr. Pierce, thank you very much for all of that. I think that there are some comments and questions maybe in the chat and
Okay.
others. And if you're
Yeah.
willing to field some questions.
Yeah,
There's-
I didn't, okay.
Well, there's one question. Do rope fences work around gardens?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know when you say a rope fence, I guess if there's a psychological barrier to it, or why would they work in the first place? I don't know.
They're trying to rope fence at their demo garden, and so far it's worked. And I think they've got a publication from Tennessee Extension, so I'll take a look at
Okay.
that. But
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they work.
right, and I've known people that have soaked that rope in the deer deterrent,
Uh-huh.
but still,
When you said rope, I didn't really know what you meant, but yeah, I've seen those, and I've seen some of what you meant on the Tennessee publication. Yeah.
Let's see. I believe that. Oh, just some comments. The deer are certainly eating all their food in the gardens and the okra, and that you've got to weed eat underneath an electric fence.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Right.
There's a lot of maintenance involved, and you mentioned, and deer are just going to take advantage of what's available. They're very opportunistic, and if you plant a little early, or if you're trying to get something started, and they come, and of course food is pretty limited right now with all the snow we have, and February and March are typically months that we haven't had spring green up yet, obviously, so we don't have a lot of succulent browse for them to eat. But when that first green up comes, they're going to be attracted to those succulent plants that have high protein, and they're going to be looking for them. So it's important to know your deer patterns in the area. I think that's very important. And I think most of the folks will agree that you're just going to have to plan ahead and hopefully deter their behavior the best you can.
Now, thank you. I don't believe there's any other questions.
I have one just asking like if you were thinking long term, like in a 1 to 10 year kind of thing, would the tall fencing be probably the most cost effective method?
Oh, that's a good question. Many of the vineyards I work with, particularly in areas of the Ozarks, when they have a lot of good habitat around them, and I mean good habitat, I guess is pretty nebulous now because good habitat's everywhere.
Right.
But when you have a lot of cover, a lot of thickets where deer will be, they've been successful with just the 7-wire high tensile fence, not the woven wire necessarily. That can get pretty expensive, but the 5 to 7 design high tensile fence where every other wire is electrified can work real well, and they've had success, and that's a little less costly. But I guess you just have to kind of weigh that out and make that decision. But again, the electric fence, that design has worked well.
Yeah, it sounds like it depends on what you're trying to grow and what you're trying to protect as well. So
that's exactly right, and you're right. And I think a lot of growers understand that they're going to tolerate some damage. The beauty about soybean production is when deer might browse the early plant, that vegetative growth can regrow and still produce a real good yield. So even though you might have some deer damage, many crops can grow out of it and still produce a crop pretty well. But I understand others can't. So it just depends on the plant you're raising.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Pierce. I really appreciate that. I think that is a common topic, a common problem that all of us across the state have to deal with. So I think it's very timely.
Well, and again, this is spur of the moment, and
Yeah.
please give me a call if I could be of any help. I I apologize for kind of messing up the first of the PowerPoint. I got messed up on my computer here, but I thank you all for the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, folks, we have our next topic is going to be growing microgreens, which can be a great thing to do right now while it's so cold. Maybe give you a little bit of fresh greenery in your home and taste to your salads. This is going to be Jennifer Schutter, and she's going to talk to us about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. And I would like to know, has anybody ever grown microgreens? And if you have, would you please put that in the chat? And you can also put what type of microgreens that you have grown. All right, so why grow microgreens? Well, microgreens are really easy to grow. They don't require a lot of time, they don't require a lot of resources, and they grow really quick. I started some the end of January and I'm already harvesting them. So they are a quick crop. They can be grown in limited space. If you live in an apartment or you just don't have a lot of space in your house, this is something you can grow in your window. So you don't have to have a grow light cart or a lot of space to do this. Microgreens are a great source of vitamins, minerals, fiber, and antioxidants, so they are really healthy for you. To get started, there are some supplies that you will need. You need a propagation tray, or if you purchase your meat at a store, you can use the meat trays, but be sure you punch holes in the bottom of it so you have good drainage. You also need some soil media or seed starting mix. And in the photo in this slide, you can see the seed starting mix that I use. So that is what I have been using to start various seeds in the last few weeks. Then you need to get you some seeds. And in a photo here, I show you packages of microgreen seed, but you can use just like a package of beet seed or cilantro seed or radish seed. You don't necessarily have to have a package of seed labeled microgreens. So there's a lot of other things that you can use for microgreens. You have to have a water source and then lighting. So lighting is important, but because these plants grow so quickly, you could put them in your window. So if you have a window sill, you could put them there and you're going to have microgreens ready to eat within 2 to 3 weeks. So if they get a little spindly, they grow toward that window or that light, that's okay. Or if you have grow lights, that's perfectly fine too. So we do like to use grow lights to have nice, compact, stocky, thick stem plants. But with microgreens, you're going to harvest them after just a couple weeks. So it is okay if they have a little bend and they're bending toward the light. So you want to take your tray and you want to fill it with soil. And with microgreens, because they grow so fast and you're going to harvest them pretty quick, you do not need a lot of soil. So just the depth of a meat tray is fine. Or if you're using a propagation tray, don't feel like you need to fill it all the way up to the top. Make sure that you wet that soil. So what I've been doing is I either fill my propagation tray with soil and then get it wet, and I use my hands to work it all in and get it evenly moist. But I've also used like a mixing bowl, and I put the media in the mixing bowl, get it wet, and I use my hands to work it up, and then I put it in my propagation trays, or I've been using cell packs on some of the things I've started. So that's a way you can do it. With the microgreens, you want to evenly plant the seeds in the tray, and you want to check your package to see if maybe they need to be pre-soaked. So with some of our seeds, you do need to pre-soak them to have better germination. And also some seeds may need to go in the refrigerator for a couple of days and be stratified so they can break dormancy. So do read the package for the directions. After you have planted your seeds, you want to moisten them and then cover them with a dome. So I covered my microgreens I planted a couple weeks ago with a dome, and I've not watered them since then because there was enough moisture in there that I did not need to water. And you do not want to overwater your seeds because you can get fungal growth and they can die. So by putting that dome on, you're holding in the moisture, and that may be enough from the time you start until the time you harvest. You can use a heating mat, but again, read the package directions because some of our seeds do not require a heating mat. Some of our cool season seeds will not need a heating mat. But then there are others that will germinate faster if you do use a heating mat. So the best advice I can give you is to read the package directions. It is recommended to keep the seeds in a dark environment for a few days to facilitate the germination process. But then there are some seeds that they need to be under light. So again, read the package directions to see if you need to put them in a dark location or if you actually need to just put them right under the lights. And I will tell you, the microgreens that I started a few weeks ago, I did not put in a dark location. I just put them out there under a grow light, and I was harvesting microgreens last night, actually. After the seeds germinate, you want to place them near a window or under a light. That is, if you've had them in darkness and you're pulling them out. You want to water them, like I had said, only if necessary. You may not need to water, okay? You don't want excess moisture in there with your seedlings because you can get mold development, and then they may get a disease called damping off, and then you won't have anything to harvest. And a fan can be used to provide airflow. So it is important for the soil to not be too wet. If you're noticing your soil is getting really wet on whatever seed you're growing, whether it be microgreens or petunia seed, you might want to run a fan to provide some airflow. This is a tray of microgreens that I grew a few years ago. You can see that I did not have a grow light and they did become spindly, but hey, that's okay because we're harvesting them at only 2 or 3 weeks. So if your plants end up looking like this, it's okay. Harvest them and use them. The photo on the right shows you some microgreens I'm growing right now. I have them on an old grow light cart that is not very good, let's say, and they're spindly. And I cut some last night, and you can see I put them on this this dish. So you can put microgreens on a lot of things. I put them on various meats, like a pork chop, or even on top of a hamburger. You can put them on chicken, just various meats that you make, or you can put them on top of soups and stews. So that's what you would use them for. Also consider putting them in omelets and on top of scrambled eggs. And when you cut your microgreens, they will have an aroma. You will smell them, and they are high in nutrients. So that's a reason why you'd want to grow them, is just to get those added nutrients. When harvesting the microgreens, use a sharp, clean knife, or you can use a pair of scissors. You can also just pinch them. So I just pinched mine off last night when I put them on top of that dish. So those are just some ways you can, again, harvest them. You can wash them. Likely they're not going to need washing, but you can wash them. And if you do, use them right away. They're like kind of like berries. When you wash them, they start going bad. So you want to wash and you want to eat right away. Now you can cut them and you can store them for later. So if you cut them, don't wash them, and then just store them in a plastic bag or in a container in your refrigerator. And then if you choose to wash, I would wash them when you go to use them. But don't ever wash them and then put them in the refrigerator wet. And again, this is regarding uses. And I had mentioned that they do have an aroma. They also have an intense flavor. So it will add a little flavor to whatever dish you're adding them to. They can add color, they can add texture. And like I already mentioned, they can be used in many ways. Some other things are salads. You can put them on top of your salad. You can put them in a wrap. I mentioned eggs. Sandwiches, if you're making a ham sandwich or a turkey sandwich or whatever it may be, just add them to your sandwich. Or in the mornings, maybe you're making a smoothie for breakfast. You can just throw your microgreens into your smoothie. And you can also use them as a garnish. And that's all I have. Kathy, are there any comments in the chat?
Yes, there certainly are. One person has grown them in a jar, and radish is their favorite. Another has successfully grown green salad mix. Another has grown cilantro and dill, but the demand was greater than the production rate. And then one question, can you grow microgreens in the garden?
Well, I think yes. I believe the answer would be yes. You're going to harvest them though, quickly, within about 2 weeks. So if you're going to put them in the garden, one thing I would do is at the end of March or early April, I would start some of the cool season seeds, like the ones that were mentioned, and then just harvest them. You could put them in your raised bed, you could do a container or in the garden, and then, watch them as they germinate. And probably within about 2 to 3 weeks, they're going to be ready for harvest outside. I'm not so sure how well they're going to do in the heat of summer, because the microgreens that we use typically are cool season crops, and cool season crops don't like June, July, and August weather.
Does seem like it'd be a good crop for a raised bed though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And containers.
Yes.
Okay, is that all we have?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, back to you, Gwen.
Perfect. I think that little dish that you had there made me think of lunch. It looked really good. All right, I am going to talk quickly here about starting seeds. So let me get this kind of going here. We had a question come in about when can I start my seeds, and specifically thinking about pepper seeds. So I want to talk generally about this, and then I'll key in on just some pepper information. So really the first thing that you need to know is where your zone is, where you live in the world, really. We have a new plant hardiness zone that was updated in 2023. So you kind of need to find your location and figure out what your zone is. You can see for me up in Maryville, it's going to be way different than, say, Traven, that is down in the Boot Hill region. So it really varies depending on where you are. So if we key in on Missouri, we can look at some of our information that we have from past climate information. So for Missouri, we can see our average last day of frost for North Missouri is about April 20th. And you can see that that changes as you move south through the state. Now, obviously, we have this Ozark Plateau that's kind of through here. So they kind of act the same as what it would be for me up here in North Missouri. So it just kind of depends on where you're located. What we have with the Extension Center is that we have this vegetable planting calendar. And what they have done is kind of divide the state into zones, looking at north, central, and south. And again, here's that Ozark Plateau that I mentioned earlier. Here is the publication, and I think that will be dropped into the chat for you so that you can kind of get an idea of this entire document. It gives you quite a bit of information about when to plant. So for an example, if your timing for your seeding date can vary, it can be anywhere from 3 to 15 weeks, depending on what you're trying to start. So our question that we had was about peppers. So for here, it's saying that late March would be the time to start seeding my peppers so that I can transplant them later after frost date in the spring. Now, these dates right here, notice that that is for mid-Missouri Zone 5. So if you're in the Boot Hill area, you might want to sow 1 or 2 weeks earlier. If you're like me in northern Missouri, then you're going to maybe wait another week or so before you actually start planting those in your little trays and to get them ready for transplant. Now, if you are working with some of the cold weather crops, cold season crops like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, those we can probably go ahead and start. I would probably start those maybe the first part of March, last week of February, even up here in Northwest Missouri. Here is the name of the publication that you can search for, and that will bring this up. And I'm just giving you a little snippet of what that is. Some varieties that you might want to look for. And again, this is giving you the days to plant them outside. And again, this can vary depending on what's going on in your weather. We've had up here in North Missouri, it says May 15th to the 30th, and we've had frosts, killing frosts, the 28th of May. Took out my entire garden that year because I thought I was going to get a good start. But this can vary 1 or 2 weeks from these dates. So you have to be ready to go and protect your plants, or you may want to wait just a little bit longer. Here are some varieties that work fairly well in our climate and soil conditions. So these are some of the ones that you might want to look for. In addition, and this is from the vegetable planning calendar again, so you can kind of look at that and get that information. But also, a few of us horticulture field specialists are working with the All American Select program, and we have received some seeds that we are going to try and just see how they do in our area. So this is one that was a winner in 2022 that was these are new varieties, and this was one that was supposed to do well in our area, and that's called the Dragonfly. So that might be one that you might want to look at. It has a little bit thicker skin, a sweeter taste than maybe some of the previous purple colored varieties. We also have the Quickfire. This is a Thai chili, so these are like hot. And that hot comes on really quick in your mouth. But you can see that this is a nice little compact plant that you can grow in a container and get some of your peppers all season or for a good long time in the growing season. And that was a winner in 2022. We can also have our jalapeno. This is, I'm not going to say this correctly. I'll do my best. San Joaquin, which was a winner in 2023, and I apologize for my pronunciation there, but a good prolific pepper plant, jalapeno pepper plant. This is a determinate type. So all of your fruit are going to come ripe about the same time. So you can, which makes it really handy for canning and freezing and processing if you have that, if that's an activity that you do. And then the last one, these are a little snack pepper. This is new this year. They're called Pick and Pop Yellow. And these are just little sweet peppers that you can pop off the vine and just chew on them right away. They are just really, really good. So those are some of the newer ones. And then here's another colored pepper, the Red Impact. And you can see the development of color here at the bottom. But was a winner from last year. So these might be ones that are not listed in our guide that are new. And you can check out that website, allamericanselects.org, and you can kind of sort by region and maybe come up with some new varieties that might be good for your area. So that's what I have there. I know that was quick and fast, but we are quickly running out of time. So are there any questions about starting seeds? Or the peppers?
Well, that one person asked if that was from plants or seed, and I said that was from seed. But and someone said that variety you mentioned that might be. I'm not going to try to pronounce it either, but I thought I had an idea. But they're very tasty and lots of production. And
nice.
Someone said. Let's see something about it. Just one second.
I see the determinate plants mature all at once. And yes, that would be, that's generally what they do. I mean, it's not going to be all at once, but your window of production is going to be much shorter. Joaquin. Okay, thank you for that.
And someone did ask, which is just off topic, is how to weather terracotta pots outside. And so I will just say you can wrap them in a tarp. You can bring them in to your into your garage. And I don't know if anybody else has any other suggestions on that. It's not really seed starting, but.
Right. All right, let me share my screen again. So we want to thank everyone very much for being here today. We are 1 minute out from our time, so I'll kind of wrap up quickly here. Thank you so much for interacting in the chat. I feel like we had a much higher engagement this session than we have had in the past. So we really want to try to open up those conversations. We're kind of trying out this format, so it's a little clunky right now, but hopefully as we move forward, we'll get the timing figured out and make this a little bit more interactive for you. Our next garden hour will be March 19th. And I hope I've got that date right. It's the third Wednesday of every month. And then again, the website that you can go to register or submit a question that you might want to be addressed. Just remember that we have horticulture special. Oh, sorry. How to save the chat. A lot of information gets dropped in the chat with websites and that kind of thing. So if you if you click on the chat and open that window up, there are 3 little dots up at the top. You click on that and then it will give you an opportunity to save the chat. And then you can, it downloads it to a file on your computer. And I think every computer is a little bit different, but you can do that. And then just remember that we have horticulture specialists all around the state. Reach out to the one that's closest to you or to one of us that you're more familiar with, maybe from being on the garden hour. It doesn't matter. We're here to help and we want to support you and help you make the best of your gardening efforts. So with that, again, thank you for being here and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.